There are nights that never leave you. Nights that replay in your mind until the guilt feels heavier than the air you breathe. I remember the smell of disinfectant mixed with loneliness that lingered in the ward that night. The machines beeped softly, the fluorescent lights hummed, and outside the rain fell as though the heavens themselves were mourning. Before I go on, I want to take a moment to appreciate every single one of you watching and listening. Thank you to all my subscribers who have been supporting this channel from day one. And to my new viewers, thank you for stopping by. I cannot wait for you to hit that subscribe button, because every click you make is the fuel that keeps this channel alive. Do not forget to share your thoughts and feelings about this story in the comments below. I read every one of them. Now, let me take you back to the night that changed everything. My name is Claire Thompson. I am a registered nurse at Memorial Medical Center in Houston, Texas. I have been married for 7 years to Mark, a paramedic with the same hospital. Together, we built what many would call a perfect life, the kind filled with morning coffee, evening laughter, and weekend getaways. But perfect things have cracks too, and mine began with exhaustion. That night, I had just completed a 12-hour shift, yet something inside me refused to go home. Perhaps it was the sight of those patients, men who had no family visiting, men who stared at the ceiling as though it were their only friend. I could not leave. Compassion is supposed to be a blessing in my line of work, but I would soon learn it can also be a curse. One of the patients, Ethan Brooks, caught my attention more than I care to admit. He was a former firefighter, recovering from severe burns and broken ribs after a building collapse. His wife had left him 2 years earlier. Every night, he sat quietly, staring out the window, listening to the rain. There was something about his silence that drew me in. It was the kind that speaks louder than words. I brought him tea. We talked. His voice was gentle, cracked, yet full of gratitude. He told me how lonely he felt, how forgotten he had become. The way he said it pierced me. Maybe it was my own loneliness reflecting through him. Mark and I had barely spoken that week. He worked nights, I worked days, and our marriage had turned into a relay race where one left home as the other entered. So, I stayed longer. I told myself I was being kind. That I was simply offering comfort to someone who needed it. But compassion has borders, and that night, I crossed them. When I sat by Ethan's bed, I remember his hand brushing mine. It was such a small gesture, yet it sent a tremor through my entire being. I should have pulled away. Instead, I froze, caught between my training as a nurse and the ache of a woman who had forgotten what warmth felt like. I miss being touched, he said softly. I miss feeling human. His words echoed everything I had buried inside. For months, I had felt invisible. Mark's job consumed him. Our conversations were now schedules and bills. There was no tenderness left, no spark. Just duty. And in that sterile hospital room, surrounded by the quiet hum of machines, someone finally saw me. I do not remember how long we sat there, but I remember the way his eyes held mine, pleading, broken, human. I wanted to give him hope, not harm. But emotions are wild things. Once set loose, they do not listen to reason. He reached for me, and before I could stop it, our lips met, hesitant at first, then deep, desperate. It was not love. It was loneliness colliding with loneliness, disguised as comfort. When I finally pulled away, I saw tears in his eyes. I whispered that it could never happen again. I wanted to believe myself. But the truth is, once you cross that invisible line, your soul knows it. You carry it like a scar no one else can see. As I drove home that morning, the city lights blurred through my tears. I told myself it was just a mistake, that I could bury it beneath work and silence. But the heart is not a graveyard, it resurrects every sin you try to bury. When I reached home, Mark was still asleep. I looked at him, his chest rising gently, his face peaceful, and guilt sliced through me like a knife. I wanted to wake him, confess everything, beg him to hold me. But I did not. I crawled into bed beside him and stared at the ceiling, haunted by the realization that I had just become the very thing I once despised. It was supposed to be a moment of kindness. It became the moment that destroyed everything. The days that followed felt like walking through fog. Every sound, every face, every heartbeat reminded me of that night, of the line I crossed in a place where trust was sacred. I tried to convince myself it was over, that it was a moment of weakness that would fade with time. But guilt has a way of clinging to your spirit like smoke after fire. No matter how much you wash, it never truly leaves. Mark began to notice the changes before I even said a word. I started coming home later, working extra shifts I did not need, and avoiding his eyes during breakfast. The silence between us grew louder each day, filling the air like a storm waiting to break. Mark was a good man, devoted, patient, loyal. He had never given me a reason to doubt his love. But love without presence can still starve a soul. He worked back-to-back emergency calls, sometimes returning home just as I was leaving for my shift. Our marriage had turned into an empty hallway, echoes without warmth. I told myself I was tired, that I only needed rest. But deep down, I knew what I truly needed was forgiveness, and I did not even know how to ask for it. A week after that night, Ethan was discharged from the hospital. I watched him leave from the hallway, his steps slow, his shoulders still fragile from the accident. He looked back once, and our eyes met. It lasted only a second, but it felt like an eternity. There was no smile, no farewell, only the heavy truth that we both knew something forbidden had happened between us. I wanted to erase him from my memory, but human emotions do not vanish on command. His face lingered every time I walked past room 214. His voice whispered in my mind when I was alone in the break room. And worse, a part of me missed him, not the act, but the comfort, the attention, the feeling of being seen. That guilt became my constant companion. It followed me home, it sat beside me at the dinner table, it lay next to me at night. One evening, I found Mark sitting on the couch when I returned home. He was still wearing his paramedic uniform, his hands clasped tightly together. His eyes looked tired, but not from work. Something about the air in the room told me he had been waiting for me, and not for good reasons. "Claire," he said quietly, "is everything all right with us?" His question cut deeper than any accusation could. I wanted to say yes, to lie, to pretend that everything was fine. But the tremble in my hands betrayed me. I could feel tears pressing behind my eyes, yet I swallowed them down. "I am just tired," I said. "Work has been heavy." He nodded slowly, studying me like a puzzle missing its final piece. I knew he did not believe me, but he did not press further. Instead, he reached out, took my hand, and held it for a long time. That small act, his quiet love, made the guilt almost unbearable. I wanted to scream, to confess, to undo time itself. But instead, I stayed silent. The following week, Ethan reached out. It was late at night. I was sitting in my car in the hospital parking lot, scrolling through my phone before heading home. That was when I saw his name flash on my screen. "I wanted to say thank you," the message read. "For caring when no one else did." My breath caught in my throat. I stared at the message for what felt like hours, my fingers hovering above the keyboard. I should have ignored it. I should have deleted it. But instead, I replied. "You do not need to thank me. Just focus on healing." His reply came quickly. "It is hard to heal when the only thing that felt alive is gone." My heart pounded. I knew what he meant, and I knew how dangerous it was to keep this conversation alive. But loneliness is a dangerous comfort, it makes you crave the very thing that destroys you. From that night onward, the messages became more frequent. Sometimes they were innocent, updates on his recovery, memories from the hospital, jokes about how much he hated hospital food. But beneath it all was a current of emotion neither of us dared to name. Mark began to sense my distance. He tried to bridge it, surprise dinners, weekend plans, gentle words. But my heart was no longer present in those moments. It was trapped between remorse and confusion. Then came the night everything began to fall apart. Mark had gone to work for a night shift. I was home alone, sitting on the couch with my phone in hand. Ethan had sent another message, something simple, but dangerous in its implication. I miss talking to you. My fingers hesitated, then responded before I could think. I miss it too. I do not know how long I stared at that screen afterward, but I remember feeling like I had just stepped into a darker place. It was no longer about compassion or comfort. It was an emotional affair now, one I could not justify. What I did not realize was that Mark had forgotten his phone charger at home that night. He returned quietly an hour later, stepping through the front door as I sat lost in my thoughts. I did not even hear him come in. When he saw me smiling faintly at my phone, curiosity drew him closer. I remember the sound of his voice, calm, confused, then broken. Who were you talking to? I froze. My fingers trembled, my heart raced, and my throat went dry. I tried to lock the screen, but he had already seen the name. Ethan, he whispered, disbelief filling his tone. The patient from your ward? Silence fell between us, heavy and suffocating. He looked at me with a mixture of pain and fury I had never seen before. The man who once looked at me with love now looked as if he no longer recognized me. Tell me this is not what it looks like, he said. But I could not. My silence was louder than any confession. He left that night. No words. No goodbye. Only the echo of the door closing, a sound that shattered everything I had left inside me. For days, I could not eat. I could not sleep. I sat in the kitchen, staring at my phone, wondering if he would call, if he would forgive me, if this nightmare could be undone. But forgiveness does not come easy when trust has been burned to ashes. Ethan kept texting, but now his messages felt heavy, tainted by guilt. I wanted to hate him, but I could not. I had chosen this path. I had created the storm that swept away the life I once knew. And as I looked around my empty home, I finally understood the cruel irony of it all. I had felt sorry for those men in the hospital because they were lonely. But in trying to ease their loneliness, I had created my own. There are moments in life when silence becomes the loudest punishment of all. After Mark left, the house that once echoed with laughter became a graveyard of memories. His toothbrush was gone. His uniform no longer hung on the chair by the door. Even the coffee mug he always used, the one with the chipped handle, was missing from the counter. It was as if he had erased himself completely from my world. I kept expecting him to return, to walk through that door with the same tired smile he always had after work. But he never did. What he left behind was far worse than absence. He left me with the weight of what I had done. The days turned into weeks. The guilt was relentless, creeping into every corner of my mind. I went to work and pretended everything was normal, but inside, I was hollow. The patients I once cared for no longer felt like souls in need, they became mirrors reflecting my own brokenness. My colleagues noticed my change. I heard whispers in the hallway. The rumor of my connection with Ethan had started to circulate. A fellow nurse had seen the messages one night when I accidentally left my phone on the break room table. In the medical world, secrets never stay buried for long. It did not take long before the hospital management called me in for questioning. They spoke of professionalism, ethics, and the boundaries every caregiver must uphold. I sat there, numb, barely hearing the words. All I could think of was how far I had fallen from who I once was. I was suspended for 2 months. 2 months to reflect, they said. But reflection was not what I needed. What I needed was forgiveness, and I knew I might never have it. One evening, as the sun bled orange across the Houston skyline, my phone rang. It was Ethan. I almost ignored it. I wanted to leave everything behind. But guilt made me answer. His voice sounded weaker, almost broken. He told me he had relapsed, his body was rejecting one of the surgeries. He said he did not have much time. I froze. Every part of me wanted to run to the hospital, to hold his hand, to tell him that everything would be all right. But I knew what that would mean. It would be another crossing of the line, another betrayal of the vows I had already shattered. Still, I went. When I entered his room, he smiled faintly. He looked older, frilier. His eyes, once full of pain and longing, now looked at peace. "I never meant to ruin your life," he said softly. Tears filled my eyes. "You did not," I whispered. "I ruined it myself." He smiled one last time, whispered that he was glad someone had cared for him, and then closed his eyes. The monitors went flat, and for a moment, everything inside me went still. That was the night I realized how dangerous mercy can be when mixed with loneliness. After his funeral, I returned home and found a letter waiting on my doorstep. It was from Mark. He wrote that he had filed for divorce but did not hate me. He said he was angry, hurt, and disappointed, but he could not bring himself to wish me pain. He told me that love, when broken, does not always die, sometimes it just changes shape. And in that letter, he left me with a final line that has never left me since. Sometimes love's greatest proof is letting go before resentment takes its place. I read those words 100 times, and each time, my heart shattered in a different way. It took me months to find a new job, to rebuild the smallest pieces of myself. The suspension turned into a resignation. The home Mark and I shared was sold. I moved into a small apartment overlooking the bay. It was quiet there, too quiet at first, but slowly, it became a place where I could breathe again. I started volunteering at a hospice center, taking care of patients who had no one else. This time, I learned to draw the lines clearly. I learned that kindness does not require crossing boundaries, it only requires heart. But some nights, when I walk through those quiet hallways, I still think of Ethan. I still think of Mark. And I still think of the woman I used to be, the woman who let her loneliness destroy everything she loved. I know I cannot undo what I did, but I have learned to live with it. I have learned that redemption is not about escaping the past, it is about facing it every single day and choosing to do better. And to everyone watching right now, if you have made a mistake that feels too heavy to forgive, I want you to know that pain does not have to be the end of your story. We all fall, we all break, but what defines us is whether we choose to rise again. Before you leave, I want you to think deeply about this. Have you ever let loneliness push you into a place you never thought you would go? If this story touched you in any way, please like, share, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Your support means more than words can express. And if you are new here, I would love for you to hit that subscribe button, because every click helps this channel keep telling stories that touch the heart, heal the soul, and remind us that we are never truly alone. Until next time, remember this: compassion is beautiful, but boundaries protect the heart.